Record. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second Pyware Socially Distanced Drill Challenge. I would like to welcome on Kevin Nix, Wes Pendergrass, Tim Fairbanks, and Richard Hinshaw as our judges. And we have our winner Hunter Dugie. How's everyone doing today? I'm glad to have y'all on in this wild and crazy world we have. So,
totally.
All right, what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into looking at some of the drills. We've got our top 5 we're going to go through. Our second honorable mention we have here is from Austin Hall. Let's pull up here, guys. We're going to play this tune real quick, and then we're going to talk about it. All right, guys. Well, who would like to start? I'd like to get some feedback on this drill from Austin. What were your takeaways?
For me, starting with me, I thought it was, I liked the idea and the use of props and thematic idea in the pit and all of that. I thought was really cool. I think the thing that concerned me was where the percussion was located, kind of in coordination with the tubas and how far back the brass was pretty much throughout the whole thing. So in terms of realistic approach to being able to do exactly what it was, I don't think it would work very well in those terms. Creative wise though, there was a lot of going on. It was very interesting. The drill developed really well. So it's one of those situations where maybe the drill worked well, but in reality, having a band try to do it probably wouldn't have worked very well. So it kind of, for me, it was kind of a dichotomy of, well, it kind of works for the idea, but it doesn't work for the realism of a band, maybe. Right. The guard staging, the flags themselves were kind of a secondary thought way on the perimeter too, which for me was a problem.
I'm so glad I took notes. Like I took notes on all these and I actually kept them, which I never do. So I'm so glad that I can remember what I actually thought the first time. Because that, that's the trick sometimes. You want to be able to address the first impression.
Right.
So I agree. I had the same issue with some of the percussion staging for sure. And for me, in the first half of it, I didn't always know where to look. There was a lot of cool things happening, but it wasn't, the focal point wasn't great. Even with the prop, I had a hard time finding the soloist. I don't know if you guys had that. And that was a big part of this challenge, I think, was could you find the soloist? And then for me, the better part was in the back half with the percussion section. The use of the stagger tool was really great. The use of staggering the visuals, the guard integration and the woodwind feature, that whole section was a big strength. even how that pulled out into the ending. I really liked that. I wasn't sure where, wasn't really sure. It wasn't clear to me whether there was a concept or whether there wasn't. Not sure. And then the resolution was a bit of an issue. And I think it was tough for a lot of people, the resolution, because musically, you know, you had to figure out how to treat that because it's leading to something else that's not happening, right? And then my only other thing that I had, isn't it interesting, like, and Kevin, this goes to what you said about the reality. Nobody moved that prop, right? It just moved. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah, it was motorized.
Yeah. So but I think that's really interesting, and that's a good point to say. And I know, right, Dustin, that was something we talked about, was it's got to be, it still needs to apply to actually being able to do it. So
Right.
Well, and there is the reality of, I mean, we've seen this now for the last 2 or 3 years where people are using props that either have people inside them or they are motorized and no one is actually pushing them, that you can see literally.
Mhm.
You know, we've seen that we've used alternate people standing inside a prop and they move it at certain times, but you never really see the human. So, you know, that could have been the idea there, but we
Sure.
we don't know.
Sure, that's true. Good point.
I'll go ahead and go next. Dustin, you may want to give us an order to go next time, since we're all so polite and don't want to be the first one to go.
Sure.
So when I was judging both of these sessions, first I asked myself 2 questions. One, is this a group that could make finals in our competition?
Mm-hmm.
And 2, is this a group that could win, right? They had to pass through those first filters. And when I watched this one, I was like, yes, this is definitely a finalist. This is a good drill. It's nice and socially distanced. I think he's got a really good grasp on the paced visuals tool, which took me a long time to really master. Lots of good rifle ripples and things like that that are difficult to actually do. For me, being a drummer, I would have liked to watch this show if the horns weren't playing. But also being a teacher, I would not have wanted the drum line down in that bottom right corner the whole time. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to win, but it is going to make finals. So that was kind of my thought process.
Great.
My initial reaction was that it's very aesthetically pleasing, like how it's arranged on the field and how it's presented in terms of the propscape is really interesting to me. Similar to the other gentleman in the room, my big takeaway was it felt like performers occupied the same space for the duration of the program. And although that's not necessarily something that is a pro or con, if you can identify that those specific performers are actually doing that, that becomes a con. For me, the highlight of the whole thing was really the interplay of the weapon element against the woodwinds in the back half of it. And if I had seen that type of guard integration and coordination elsewhere in the program, and also in the flags in particular, I think it could have helped elevate it in general. There is the elephant in the room that we're kind of all talking about really is vertical timing in an ensemble. And it would have been very, very difficult to coordinate in terms of vertical time from front to back, just because of where the elements were presented. And also it's really brassy and fanfare. Steve Vinto did a great job on it. But to have that element sit so far back in the stage for such a long period of time doesn't really give us a musical resolution or arrival. Even at the end, that could have been a great moment to come forward and give us a little bit of that resolution to push into the visual idea and the musical idea at the very, very end.
Dustin, you were asking about how we've experienced writing in this new kind of way. And I saw a lot in this drill of the things that I struggle with when I'm writing with having socially distanced drill. A lot of times, you know, if I want to get the guard through something or to the other side of the brass, I fold something in, or I pass something through, or I conveyor belt, or whatever I do, which instantly puts people within 6 feet of each other. So I've found myself writing 7, 8, 9 pages and like putting the brakes on because I've got the brass on this side and the woodwinds on this side for a while. And normally I would have given some variation there, but I'm like, yeah, I think it's probably okay this year.
Yeah.
Right.
And in some cases, they want that because the brass and the woodwinds can never rehearse together.
Right.
I've gotten a few of those.
Taste has value.
Yeah, pretty much everybody has said that at this point.
Easy.
Is it anybody else enjoying Wes's halo? Like the halo effect from your headphones? Yeah.
It's great. All right. Well, let's take a look at our first honorable mention, Adam Nelson. All right, here we go.
I'm not seeing it. Are you guys seeing
Dustin,
it?
we can't see it.
Can't see it?
I can see everybody, but not, there we go.
Let's start over here.
Oh, yes.
There we go. All right. Kevin, you want to start it up again?
Yeah, I think for me, this was a really appropriate setting for everything that went on. I thought the elements were staged nicely. The only thing about it that at the end, I'm not sure that Arrival would actually have worked as well because of the location of the brass. The moving at halftime to me doesn't really fit the music at that moment, but it does create variety. So maybe you could assume there was going to be more than just moving at halftime and they were going to do some body visual and stuff with it, which could have given it more energy. So maybe that would work in that situation. From just a design perspective, the thing that I thought was odd is that the prop was a predominant triangle, but we used a lot of block formations as opposed to triangles within the drill itself. So to me, I wanted to see more of a reference in the use of that form because it was such a predominant item. But in general, I thought it all worked correctly. It was well done, and it would certainly serve somebody well. You know, it had those good qualities to it.
Yeah,
Appropriate
I was
card
gonna
staging.
definitely agree on the strength of just the prop idea.
Yeah.
And it was clearly intended to be a broad thought. It wasn't intended to be a specific narrative type idea. It was very clear in that intent. So that's what I liked about it. I think that I wasn't expecting the prop to come apart. I thought that was cool. Yeah. I agree that for sure it could have referenced more of the triangle thought in the staging. One thing that just occurred to me that didn't occur to me the first time, they used the same speed of the guard choreography the whole time, which kind of became a distraction. And really what I think that people should try to do more is to say, no, it's only the rifles right now. Now it's only the flags, or the flags are slower, or put the flag down, or here's some tossing. Like, I think the more you do that for your clients in the real world, that shows the intended focus and shows the intended primary, secondary, tertiary, the better. And I think that had they done this in this design, it would have elevated because it was set up to do that well. It was set up to have shared, delivered focal points, but it was just the same. God's just like, knowing where to look is so important.
any young designers out there that are listening, that advice that Richard just gave is really good. That's really good advice. So listen to that. Knowing what to look at, what you're intending people to look at by using the visuals editor is really, really super important. So good advice. I thought in this drill, the curve shapes at the beginning with some contrary motion going opposite directions with good flag integration was a plus. At the same time, while the flags were really well integrated, I felt like the rifles were a little bit kind of stuck over there on side 2 in their own little world for a while. And then when they were integrated visually in our sight line, they were behind the feature that was happening musically, and I would have probably preferred them to be in the middle of it or in front of it. The triangle shapes, I think that's a really good lesson for everybody. Just a quick story about that, like what you're presenting to the audience and to the judges, that's all they have to go on. So if you're gonna show me a bunch of triangles, then you know, make sure I believe that the show's about triangles. I had a client one time that did a show called Angles, and it was straight lines in the opener, 2 angles in the second song, and triangles in the closer. And at BOA and prelims, Chuck Henson goes, presenting their performance, Angels. And I just gasped. And I have a tape for commentary from Marie Chapinski that haunts me to this day, where she's like, everything's just so angular. I can't believe this show's about angels. And I'm like, it's not. So what you give the audience, you got to stick to it and make them believe it.
That's funny.
That's hilarious.
So I'm sorry I got bumped off. Living in the woods has its pros and its cons. I'm experiencing the cons right now. The thing that I think kind of kept this from going a little bit farther in my mind was we have to think of gesture and motion as being something that draws our eyes to a location often. And the use of the stagger tool and the sequentials in the second half of the production in the woodwinds on side 2, they just kept always going off towards the end zone. And it didn't necessarily feel like that was where we were supposed to be traveling the eye at that point. And we did that motion about 5 times in a row when there's a really well-staged flag moment on side 1 right next to it. And then also we're using that thematic device with the props behind it, right, leading into that moment right before that. It just seemed like it was a missed opportunity. That exact same flow and motion, and even the drill could have happened in the exact mirror and traveled towards what kind of presented itself to be more focused in that moment.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, gents. Let's take a look at our third place. It is James Hensley. All right. I've got it shared this time. All right, Kevin.
All right, so obviously thematic with the tape measures, which is kind of cool. And spelling the six or forming the six at the end with I think it was rifles probably, to me, this whole thing worked well. It was coordinated well. I thought the flags could have been a little bit better staged for the last arrival, but sometimes that's just preference as to what you want the focus to be. But everything kind of flowed in place and made sense and went with the music well. And I thought actually the elements were staged well and coordinated with, musical arrivals. So for me, that was a really quality product.
Yeah, I wrote down, and it held up, is that this one had a ton of clarity and unity. You knew where to look a lot. And the way the elements worked together was really strong. Obviously clever with the prop, but that's also a negative that probably had a huge opportunity with that prop to truly have it integrated into some ideas and have it. I didn't notice the tape measures expanding until this time I watched it, but imagine that inside of an idea. Imagine that motivating an idea, or an idea motivating it back. How that could have been done as an effect. Maybe a little simplistic from the standpoint of motion, which helps some of the clarity. But for example, during the front ensemble moment, it was I would say a little slow pacing wise relative to what was happening musically. But I liked it.
Yeah, this one was an interesting one for me. I said that, I asked, is it going to make finals? Could it win? And when I watched this the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, this might win. I'm not sure who else is going to come on after it. But it was really well constructed. Anybody have any idea what this guy's website is? Is it the Marching Warehouse?
Marching Warehouse, something like that?
I'm just kidding. It's in the end zone and in the middle and in the pit. Anyway, I thought that it's kind of the inverse of the first one that we watched, where it's a little less aesthetically pleasing maybe as far as variety and content goes, but I would rather teach it. I didn't feel like there was going to be any problems to go into a critique and answer questions that a judge would have and not be able to answer them. So this was a good one. This was a really solid choice.
Yeah, I really liked the prop idea and the props moving and stuff like that. I wish that had been incorporated in a way that it was more perceptible initially, just like right on the first read. When I first saw it, I was kind of critical. I was like, man, all these open-ended forms, and I don't understand this spiralized follow the leader and stuff like that. And then I realized, the second viewing this, oh my gosh, this is kind of an abstraction of the tape measure thing. Something that kind of strikes me, and guard staging in particular is something that everybody has very distinct thoughts on it. But a lot of times we need to make sure that we have the same number of textures in the color guard that there are musical textures. So there's a couple times where there's 2 flag textures or 3 flag textures, but there's really only one primary line being covered. And then there's also the weapons up front, so that it looks like it doesn't necessarily facilitate what's going on musically with the number of visual textures in terms of compatibility in the color guard. But I was really, really impressed with the tune, loved it, and again, Marching Warehouse apparently.
All right, well, let's get this next one popped up. There we go. Okay. All right, our second place is from Damon Underwood. Let's get this going. And here we go. All right, Kevin.
So, I mean, I struggled quite a bit with this one. I don't understand the hurricane part of it. In going, I mean, was it supposed to be COVID and 6 feet apart? And in other words, I guess my question was, is that what the show is supposed to be about? Because I felt like this was a show about a storm, you know, what was the white thing? Are they wearing a dome or a skirt? Do we
I
know?
think it's kind of it makes me feel like each individual person is a storm as well.
A cloud, maybe?
They're like a cloud base or a piece of the hurricane or something like that.
Okay.
The way that I interpreted the white skirt, to me, it seemed like the way to keep people 6 feet apart. If we've seen all those pictures of people in the swimming pools with the big tubes around them, every individual has like a buffer. That was how I saw it. And I thought it was pretty clever, actually.
Yeah, and you know, I looked it up. So it is a hurricane that happened recently. This was actually a hurricane. And I didn't write, they didn't have to have a concept that was specifically relative to COVID, right?
Correct, they did not.
Yeah, but I thought it was clever that it was a concept that was still current events, but not COVID.
Right.
And then, yeah, I just took that it was one of those rolling domes. You know, like we used them in the Men Are From Mars show. And you could be in those things and move them.
Right.
And, that's what I took it as. But yeah, I had to look it up. I mean, I admit I looked it up, and that added to it for me that it was, oh, this hurricane just happened.
Right.
And I thought it worked. You know, it works pretty well. It's clever. The focus is typically obvious wherever the solo is and the flag feature and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it all flowed and worked well.
Yeah. This one also, the white domes, I was really intrigued by that idea. I was like, oh, put that in the notebook and maybe because they could take it and they could leave it and go somewhere else and come back to it. And it really gave them a great dot. Like, we're always searching for what uniform combination is going to make the dots look really clean, or readable or tickable. And their dot was obviously really obvious. I was cringing thinking about how many different times he'd have to select people and then reselect their skirts to get them to all stay in the same spots. I thought that was probably a pretty big challenge. But this one also, I thought when I watched it, okay, this one could win. And I actually had to go back between Hunters and this one and watch them both again. These were my top two for sure.
Yeah, I did too. And these were, for me, this was a big jump. The top two were significantly, 3 or 4 points above the next chunk. My thing about this one too, it's maybe the only one that provided for a great resolution. Mm-hmm. Even though you don't know what's happening next, you could see how this sets you up to get to the next thing in a really, obvious, clear way where I'm not like, what am I watching? Are we just dissipating for the sake of dissipating? This at least sets you up into something that could be, okay, now there's going to be what's the next thing? I don't know. It could have been a soloist in the middle of the spiral. But yeah, I think I was captured certainly by the cleverness of figuring out what it was mostly. And yeah, I mean, it may be a little simplistic probably could have added a layer or two in a few more ideas. I could see how it became a little bit like 1 or 2 textures too much. Probably that would be my main advice, is find 1 or 2 places in this construction to have more of a multiple event feel or break more of the textures up. But totally agree with Tim about the point of how cool it is to be at the prop and then away from the prop, and the simplicity of that and how that immediately changes what you're looking at.
It also is really easy in a lot of the 6-foot spacing drill, especially in a marching band field, for things to start to look really gritty. And it wasn't until I turned the floor off on the file and I turned off the bubbles. It's a really, really gritty presentation, but when you look at it in its context, because he's removed the ability to see the grid, when you look at it in context, you're missing a lot of the things that make it really transparently simplistic. And there's a little bit of beauty in simplicity. I agree with Richard, though, that it could have had maybe 1 or 2 more elements. There is a lot of focus in that down left corner, but we're left with a moment where it could go anywhere next. And so it does feel like it provides a resolution. I also thought it was the one that didn't necessarily take the most risks for the actual performer. There's very, very few risks for the actual performer, incredibly achievable in terms of how it would be presented on the field. But it definitely took a lot of risks in how the aesthetic works and is manufactured. So they're picking their battles there. I appreciated it a lot.
Wonderful. And to the comment about, or from Tim, how to manage everything, that's where the selection history tool comes into effect. You can actually create your favorites there, so you can have your skirts for a section be listed there and your performers for a section there, so you can easily jump back and forth and reselect them. So, all right. And now,
I just want to know what the budget is for that tarp. What do you guys think?
That I don't have an answer for.
And hopefully they've got dots on it so that all that gritty stuff Wes was talking about is going to be achievable, because we can see their dots for sure.
All right. And we have our grand prize winner, Hunter Dugie. Let's take a look at his. All right, Kevin.
Yeah, I felt like it was very interesting to watch. The carts are really cool. It's a great idea. And you know, thematically, just the thought of everybody, what we've had to deal with and going to the grocery store has been, you know, it was kind of comical. The other thing about it was wind wise, I felt like the whole thing was completely doable, and would be accomplished. My concern, of course, would be the pit on the 20 and 30 yard line that whole time. And just that challenge could be, you know, that's going to be tough. It didn't resolve as well as I wanted it to guard wise, but wind wise it did. And the focus pushing over towards the grocery store, I thought worked well at the very ending. It's just that the carts and the flags didn't really get to an ending for me. But I mean, it's really well done and crafty and cool.
Yeah, that's my only criticism is the end.
Yeah.
It really was just, it created a split. Ultimately, you create a split focus in the end. Now, but I don't know how critical of the end I can be, because the musical ending is kind of, you'd have to know what happened next. But otherwise, I mean, my prop game sucks. I mean, these props and what you did with them is outrageous. And how it applied to the concept on every level, and then the variety of places, the passing the cart back and forth, the pulling the guard equipment for a surprise out of the prop, that's a 10. The way that the lanes happened and the people, you could feel like you were at the store. So great job, dude. Loved it.
Yeah, I thought this was one, as soon as I watched it, I thought, well, somebody's going to have to be really damn good to beat this, because this is, you know, I think the criticism about the ending is pretty spot on. The ending's not amazing, but everything else is good enough that if I was already in box 5 before I got to the ending, and you would have really had to shit the bed for me to go back out of it. You know what I mean? Like, you'd already won at that point. And what Richard was talking about earlier about slow moving things, fast moving things, giving the intent to the designers or the people that are teaching it. I noticed in this file, there's rifles down front that are spinning pretty quickly with the line they're picking up, and in the back, the flags are moving slowly. That's a good application of that advice that Richard was talking about earlier. The way that the shopping carts were used to motivate the forms, especially in the back third, through the lanes, and then when they both went this way and the boxes rotated, you know, to complement that, I thought that was all really good. I was wondering, first of all, I thought, oh, this must be a Michael Shapiro show, because all of these different, like, nobody would put a shopping cart out there except for him. But I thought all of the art and props tools and all those things were great. The last time we did this, we had kind of an internal discussion on, like, well, is really aggressively good costumes and flags and props and all those things, is it a Photoshop competition or is it a drill competition? But I thought this had a really good combination of being good at both of those things. So yeah, great job. After I watched this one, I got on Facebook and I was like, who is this dude? I need to find him out. He's outside of my radar. Nice job.
I kind of gave myself away in the last one. I actually do go through the files and kind of just spot check for artifacts and stuff like that, kind of see how some of these things were designed and what tools they were using and stuff like that. Your file in general, I don't think if people get to watch the video will really get to understand. Hunter actually went through and did every single note to make sure every single second works in the whole thing. So not only are you getting the pretty video and the pretty presentation and all of the aesthetic stuff like that, but it is like plug and play ready to teach, to the point where it almost looks like it was created for an ensemble, like in real life. And the attention to detail is really, really, really nice. And then all the gluing and stuff like that, it's really obvious all of the tools were used in their intended format the entire time. So not only are you schooling us in how it looks, you're schooling us in how it was presented in terms of its design itself. My biggest criticism in terms of just how the drill is laid out is you go to an archetype texture in the flags for a really, really long time. We actually go through 3 very different changes musically. And then a little bit of that was to facilitate the shopping cart exchange, but that already existed relative to the program in other places. But to stay in that texture that long with that many musical opportunities being passed, it would really be the only thing that kind of just stuck out in my mind, is going, I don't know if that feels like the best decision. But if anybody ever gets the chance to see the charts and setup and stuff like that for the file, it's outstanding. Thank you. Congratulations.
Hunter, if you'd like to give any background on your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Also, I appreciate it. I appreciate the feedback. Definitely agree with everything I heard there. In general, whenever I start a show, I just sit down with the music. I don't look at the score. I just listen to it and I kind of close my eyes. And because a lot of the shows that I write, I also do choreography for them. So it's a combined visual element, especially in today's age. It's more staging than, XYZ drill, and then you add choreography to it. We know what the choreography is going to be beforehand. You can kind of write the drill to set that up. For this show, the week before, I think it was due early August, which usually that's like drill writers don't have any time there. And the week before that, I didn't have any clients that were choosing to go forward with the show until like 5 or 6 days before. And I think like 8 of them messaged me and were like, hey, we're going to do a show. Can you get this to us? So I was kind of crunched on time. And actually the day it was due, I was like, all right, cool. I'll wake up early and then I'll just crank this out. The night before, I went to the grocery store. And whenever I got there, there was a greeter at the door that like greeted me and made sure I was wearing a mask. They were close to closing, so like time was kind of on my mind, getting through there quickly. There were a bunch of people, like they had the little alleyways that were saying, go the right direction, this is the way you should go. And a lot of people were just like ignoring that or blocking the pathways. And then they were also out of toilet paper. So I was like, oh my God, still out of toilet paper. So whenever I got back home, I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to do this show about going to a supermarket, which isn't usually my style. And with a minute of music, it's kind of hard to tell a full story that resolves and gets the actual point across. So in the overall structure of it, I just thought about the greeter, and you can kind of see with the guard, they're the shoppers. And then the winds are like the store, they're the alleys, they're the employees, they're the produce. So as it starts, it's like you're entering in the store and there's a greeter who's saying hello. And then it sets up this circle focused on the soloist, obviously just to make sure that that focus is there, with a brass arc, because I think somebody said it earlier, this music was pretty fanfaric, pretty heavy brass stuff. And I knew I wanted them to be there to kind of give you that musical punch after the visual soloist or the musical soloist. And that's kind of why they're set around the guard circle. That cart circle also kind of doubled as a clock in my mind. So it's 12 members. And like with rifle work is what I really think about whenever I'm thinking about time and quicker type music, kind of what that solo was. Out of that, it sets up for the woodwind feature, which I love putting a woodwind feature right in the pocket because they're musically a lot softer of a voice. And if you put them in the back or on the side, it's kind of hard to hear them. So I said, let's bring them down on the yard lines and then have the carts going the correct direction on the alleyways, just like you would have if you were shopping. So if I could animate more of this, what I would have done is in the middle had those people going through and acting like they're grabbing stuff. Because if you actually see closer up in the back, whenever the flags go back to the actual alleys where there's like produce on them, I animated them picking up stuff and putting it in their cart basket, which that I love in a show whenever there's more than just one visual voice. So there's the drill, the guard that's working together, but then also you've got the secondary and tertiary voices that are doing something else that if you're only watching that, you can also enjoy watching that. So what I was doing there is they're back there kind of playing around with the carts. There's little limitations to the animation you can do in terms of like body work and whatnot. Yeah. But Pyware gives you the chance to show, I'm reaching up top, I'm reaching down low, I'm putting in my cart. And then as the last little musical phrase before the last resolve, there's that faster build, and it's like a cello or getting louder. It was getting louder, getting more intense. And I love it whenever guard pushes drill to the side so that the guard drill is the visual motivator to that drill. And just a simple choreography, it's doing 2 steps over to the right or 4 steps to the right as the music's building, kind of brings it into that last idea. And then the last idea where they pull and then the boxes rotate, I was going to put an exit sign on side 2 so it looks like they're leaving the store, but I forgot to put that in there. And I also thought, like, it's only a minute and a half into the show. I don't think right. You don't have that much time to get that last idea across. So I didn't want to have too much in there, but there's definitely a lot of stuff packed into that music.
I think it's wonderful. Definitely the winner of the $1,000 prize.
Yeah, congrats.
You should, you gotta save the concept and develop it, do it with somebody. It's cool.
Yep, it's a weird one, but I would totally do that.
Yeah, there's
a school wanted to.
Things you could do with, the sounds and the voiceover. You could really design music around that thought. It's cool.
Yeah.
Well, after watching our top 5, is there anything else that we can give for tips, tricks, anything on designing socially distanced drills, since now some people are actually able to march some? Anything else you'd like to add?
I'll go. I just have one thing. I often talk to, like any Pyware students that I'm teaching, I talk to them a lot about their brush size and to paint with a bigger brush to start. Most people are going page to page and every page has to be something cool and they have a really tiny brush that they're painting with. And I found that with my writing in this kind of a situation that I've had to make my brush even bigger. In my spreadsheets of show planning, I'm widening my scope even more. I'm not just thinking about 45 seconds. I'm thinking about what's the middle of the next song, because if I need to get the brass in the front, it's going to take a hot second to do that. I can't just pass them through the woodwinds like I normally would. So paint with a big brush.
Richard?
My biggest thing is everybody's in a different situation right now. I mean, you know, so it just comes down to serving your client and what they need, what they want, what they can do. And everybody's different. I mean, to be honest, I have very few people that are actually putting spacing restrictions. Mm-hmm. Now we'll see when Texas finally gets going here.
Right.
But most people are not doing that, for me anyway.
Yeah, me neither.
But it really just comes down to, you know, advising people what, you know, maybe they should consider in a shortened, because everybody's practicing less. Nobody's really competing, you know, although there's a few states, yeah, it's really just comes down to, it's very individualized client-wise this year based on what they can do.
All right. Wes?
The majority of my clients that are going on right now are doing 6-foot restrictions, and I'm getting more comfortable with it. I'm no Tim Fairbanks with the 6-foot thing, but you know, I think the biggest thing that I've really struggled with is that, especially now in our contemporary craft, the use of density to get relief and resolution. So it opens the field up, it gives negative space and stuff like that. It's really hard to create density now. And something that I'm trying to encourage people to do more of, especially for winds. Oftentimes we spend so much time in cover down blocks. Window blocks in particular are one of the only ways to give this faux appearance of density, and utilizing those window textures more can help give that relief to the eye. We can also use the tape measure tool in Pyware, and it's really easy to point out that the front to back relationship in a window block can actually be significantly less than in a cover down block, because there's still 6 feet between those performers. And so it also helps motivate getting a little bit more openness of the field, a little bit more negative space, so you can have moments of density to give you something to change how broad the field generally feels all the time. But yeah, it's an interesting battle. And as Richard says, everybody's trying to fight it a different way. So just shut up and push, as the band-dads would say. Just do what you're asked, do what you're asked, and hold on.
Yeah. Kevin, any last notes?
Yeah, so far nobody has asked for any kind of distance regulations in the drill themselves, because they're rehearsing separately. And the assumption is that eventually when they're performing, things will have changed and they're allowed to perform as normal. You know, I just kind of get to the point where I think I'm not really sure 6 feet's any different than, you know, 4 feet. When you're outside, I don't know that it makes a difference. You know, if the wind's blowing, it doesn't really matter how far you are apart. So in general, no one has told me any kind of restriction within the drill itself. I do have some schools that are doing the actual competitive show that they were designing in the first place, and they're just going to push through and continue. And then other people have said, we want to do a 6-minute version of that, or a 4-minute version of it, or scrap it, shelf it. We're going to do this other idea, you know, with all public domain music. And we're trying to go the cheap route kind of thing and save some money. So right now it's a variety of ideas like everybody else. But I've not been told to write 6 feet apart yet. So.
Well, I want to send a special thank you to Steve Vento for providing the music.
Yeah, great music.
All of our judges, Kevin, Tim, Richard, Wes, thank you all so much for having the time to do this with us. Hunter, congratulations.
Yeah. Yay.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you
coming
very
on
much.
and
Appreciate
talking
it.
back with us. It's been wonderful for our second social distance drill challenge. So thank you so much, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dustin.
Peace.
Bye, guys.